such a time as this.
And welcome to For Such a Time as This Round Table. Have with me in studio Rick and Mary Ellen, and of course Terry. How are you all doing?
Doing good.
We're doing great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the children of the angels, Nephilim after the flood. So before I turn it over to Terry, she's going to explain why we're doing this. This is coming from Genesis 6, when God judges the earth, starting off, and we'll have verses. It says that the angels came down, and we'll take this fallen angels. Angels came down, and they started to have relations. They saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and started to have relations. Many a times you would have people say, well, that's just the line of Seth. That the sons of God were Seth or whatnot, other than what I think in Scripture, every other place it says sons of God, it says angels. That's a term for angels. And so I don't see how you get around this. It talks about the Nephilims in the earth at the time, giants. Goliath was a giant and whatnot. So we have those things. And so the question becomes, if you're going to take the line of Seth, boy, you have to do some, in my opinion, some gymnastics to make that something other than what it reads on its plain reading, that it was some angelic beings were somehow engaging with humans that God disapproved of big time. But why is that important? Terry, before you get into this, if you all could give me a thumbs up, a thumbs up on YouTube, thumbs up on Rumble. Let us know we're coming through loud and clear. That would be greatly appreciated. But Terry, why is this important?
Well, I think it's important because, well, first of all, just with what you said there, I mean, we take the plain reading of Genesis 6, 1 through 4, that it says sons of God, and that refers to angels. Basically, I don't know if that's the dominant, if most Christians believe that. I think that the Bible has been de-supernaturalized in a lot of ways.
That's the reason. That's the reason. I think sometimes as Christians we don't realize that our faith is supernatural, and we shy away from those things that seem to be somewhat supernatural because we don't want to come across as kooky.
Mm-hmm.
But the God we serve is unseen. The angels clearly are, and we're fine with saying yes, those things exist, but it's more in theory. We're fine with it being in theory as long as it stays in the theoretical realm.
And thousands of years ago too. As long as it happened thousands of years ago, I'm fine with it.
Well, they won't even say, but a lot of people won't even say
this
yes,
happened. They won't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and so.
But even like the miracles of the Bible, there are many, many, many Christians who want to say that those just happened thousands of years ago. God does not do this anymore. I think that we have really our culture is very anti-supernatural. It's very materialistic, and I think that the church has been infected with that. And I know I have. And so this fascinates me, and I'm trying to gain a supernatural view, or more so, because especially if Pastor James, if you're right, and we are going into the end times, we are going to be seeing a lot of supernatural stuff. And if we don't have room for it in our worldview is going to break. And there will be a lot of people, I think, falling away. That's just my opinion. But and also, if we read it like this, I think it helps us understand the Bible better.
Yeah.
What's actually there.
We have to trust the Bible. It's the
Right.
Word of God.
Yeah.
Exactly. And none of this contradicts the Bible. I mean, I think this is what the Bible is saying, right?
I agree with you, but yeah.
So this podcast tonight is starting where we left off with the Watchers. I hope people won't be lost. I would recommend, if you haven't watched our previous podcast from a few weeks ago called The Watchers, that you go back and listen to it, because it really gives context for what we're going to be talking about tonight. But you don't have to. We're going to proceed, and we're going to start with the first Bible verse, because this is where we're starting. It says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them.
Yep. Plain reading.
There it is.
Plain reading.
And it says, the highlighted part, and also afterward. So that begs the question, how on earth did all those giants survive the flood? Or did they survive? How did we get, because the only people, as far as the Bible tells us, were 8 people. Noah and his family. It was 8 people
Correct.
on that boat.
Correct. I think it was passed off through genetically. That's me. That's mine. But go ahead.
Well, here are possibilities that people put forward. That the flood was regional.
Wrong.
Yeah, because the Bible plainly says it covered the whole earth. The Bible doesn't really leave room for that. I agree.
Yeah.
Some people think it was some kind of genetic manipulation that took place after the flood.
That survived through at least Noah's.
Well, that's number 3.
Gotcha.
Noah's daughters-in-law maybe had Nephilim blood.
Noah's children may have had. You don't know what his wife was.
Well, yeah, and depending on how you understand, like there are people who say that when God said Noah was a righteous man, what he was actually saying was he had no Nephilim blood.
That's a reach.
Yes, I agree.
Reach.
That's total speculation.
Yeah.
We do not know.
Yeah.
But Noah's daughters-in-law at least may have had some Nephilim blood. And then also there are people who believe that a new group of sons of God repeated the sins of Genesis 6.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that.
So those are, we don't know. We're speculating here. But in any case, the Bible says they were there afterward.
Yep.
And the interesting thing is they're hiding in plain sight. The Bible talks about these giants all the time. The trick is you have to know the names of their clans. So here, the Nephilim in Canaan after the flood, we had the Rephaim, the Anakim, and the Anakim seems to have been a tribe and also the kind of a generic name for giant.
Anakim.
Yes. And Zamzumim and the Emim. So, when we have those long sections of where with all the names we can't say in the Bible, we just kind of breeze right over it. There's a lot of detail in there that's important. And you wouldn't ever
And how do we know
realize.
these were
Because
tribes of Nephilim?
they are identified in the Bible specifically as giants
Okay.
in various places. And I
Giants, but how do you connect? Are we saying giants
Nephilim.
or Nephilim?
well, okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, here's the
You understand what I'm
thing.
saying?
Is there a difference in the Old Testament?
What I'm saying is, where's the link to say that the Nephilim were the giants? Make sense?
Oh, yes. I don't have the scripture for that.
Okay, but it's there. Okay.
Yes.
We'll look for it.
So, yes, and it's confirmed also. Because they first, it's confirmed when the Israelites go into the land, when they send the spies the first time, and the spies come back with the report. Oh my gosh, we were like grasshoppers compared to these people. They were humongous. And you know what's so funny about that, and we never talk about it, with regard to genetic manipulation, they came back with a cluster of grapes they had to carry on a pole.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about that.
Yep.
That's weird.
They were growing some big grapes. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they must have been the size of oranges. If you think about it, if you have to carry it on a pole. So there is high weirdness going on here. But anyway, after the flood, the giants first reappeared during the time of Abraham. In this verse. And this is when the kings came and they kidnapped Lot. right? In the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. These kings made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemaber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. And all these joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they had served Chedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in Shava Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their hill country. Okay, so the next time they're mentioned after this is when Moses sends the spies into Canaan to scout out the situation. After that, it's 40 years later, when they're going back to actually conquer. So this is, we all know the story. It's the children of the original people who left Egypt who ended up going into the Promised Land because their parents had refused to, in large part because of the report that was given by the spies that the people there were monstrously large and very frightful, okay? So this is going to be a brutal conquest. God has said that in certain cases to destroy every man, woman, and child. But it might be a little more complicated than that. Mm-hmm. According to the late Dr. Michael Heiser, the conquest of Canaan was supposed to cleanse the land of Nephilim and replace them with God's people. In other words, it's his belief that the giants were a specific target of the conquest. Mm-hmm. And here we have a quote by him. Israel's Kerem. Now, Kerem is where you devote everything to destruction. And, I think they even burned these cities. They didn't take the livestock. They just annihilated it, right? And if you remember the story of Achan, when he actually came back with, I forgot what it was that he found in the city, gold or I can't remember, to his tent. Mm-hmm. He had disobeyed, and God was very angry. He started punishing the Israelites anyway. That's a very sad story, but Dr. Heiser says Israel's Kerem focused on those regions where Anakim were known to live. Other people in those regions were living in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Joshua and his army didn't check ID. So there were certainly people, there were other tribes that had giants among them that weren't giant tribes. I mean, the Philistines would be a really good example of that, right? Because they had Goliath. I mean, he was one. Yeah. He's most famous, obviously, because...
Yeah, he had 4 brothers, too.
Yes, we're getting to that.
That's why he took 5 stones from the river. He's going to kill them. David was going to kill them all.
Well, you can enlighten us then, Rick, when we get to that part, which, yeah. Okay, and so it's his opinion, again, that the lemma Kerem is in the conquest accounts was used only of assaults in cities or locales that overlap with giant clan population clusters. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. I started to look into this, which would require a lot of diagrams and a lot of reading in Numbers and Joshua. And so if you want to look that up, everybody, I'm telling you, I have not confirmed this, but I do pretty much trust Dr. Heiser on this kind of thing. He's an Old Testament scholar, among other things, and he seems to be very careful in his work and his opinions. And if we can go, and finally, I think this lends support to what he's saying. It says, and Joshua came at that time and cut off the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua devoted them to destruction with their cities. There was none of the Anakim left in the land of the people of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod did some remain.
You know what? For the longest, when they said there are giants in the land, I just thought they meant they were 6 feet tall giants. I didn't realize they literally meant giants for the longest time. I never connected that they were a bunch of Goliaths. That they literally were giants. But you said, see, in the grapes, I thought that was hyperbole. So big they had bring them back. You know,
Well,
I didn't take it as really. No,
I guess it
they're
never
9 feet
occurred to
tall.
me that
They're now 9 feet tall. I didn't realize. I just thought
they had giant grapes too. I always thought about that, but didn't. I'm like, that's really weird. But I never heard anybody say anything or explain it or what. But that's interesting because I took it as
real giants.
Yeah, real giant grapes.
Yeah, giant food.
Right. So I don't know. But in the end, Scripture tells us that Israel failed to clear the land of its inhabitants. And the only place they were left was, ironically, Gaza.
Wow.
And, and Gaza.
Gaza just keeps coming up, doesn't it?
Man. In the news today. Yeah. And God was not pleased, and he made no bones about it, that they didn't drive. See, they were to destroy, it's Heiser's contention, that they were to destroy all the giant clans and drive everybody else out. So he thinks it was just Kerem for the giant clans, which I think is interesting. And that's this is what he says here. And the aim of the conquest was to drive out all the inhabitants and eliminate these bloodlines in the process. Now the giants, as Rick was alluding to a minute ago, the giants remained with the Philistines into the time of David, and David's mighty men fought with them. So this is a kind of a long verse, but I think it's interesting. I'm going to read the whole thing. Yeah. I had to split it up on 2 slides. It says, there was a war again between the Philistines and Israel, and David went down together with his servants and fought against the Philistines. And David grew weary, and Ishbi-Benob, one of the descendants of the giants, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of bronze, and who was armed with a new sword, thought to kill David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah,
that's his sister.
Yeah. Oh, Abishai is his.
No.
Oh,
Abishai,
son
Zeruiah is his,
okay, which I can't say.
Yeah.
Oh, so his nephew.
Yeah.
Came to his aid.
That's Joab's brother. Abishai.
I don't know how you keep all this straight, Pastor Jay.
I'm pretty sure, but go ahead.
I need a diagram.
Zeruiah is the sister. That's Joab's mother. Yeah, that was his nephew. Joab was his nephew. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's Joab's brother.
I think we had a conversation about that the other day.
Yeah.
But this Abishai came to his aid and attacked the Philistine and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, "You shall no longer go out with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel."
Yeah, because you're getting old, David.
Yes. This is too dangerous for you. It goes on to say, after this, there was again war with the Philistines at Gob. And then Sibbecai, the Hushathite, struck down Saph, who was one of the descendants of the giants. And there was again war with the Philistines at Gob. And Elhanan, the son of Jaari Oregim, the Bethlehemite, struck down Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And there was again war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number, and he also was descended from the giants. And when he taunted Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimei, David's brother, struck him down. These 4 were descended from the giants in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants.
Zeruiah, I confirmed, is the daughter of Jesse, sister of David.
However you say her name, right?
Yeah, however you say her name.
That was a tough one.
Yeah, Joab and Abishai and Ashiel were her sons. Yep.
So there are many, many more verses that talk about these clans.
I mean, how do you just read that and just keep going on?
I don't know, but I think I've done it.
No, you know what? No, I remember there was Goliath. How do you not remember the story of Goliath? I'm just thinking, Well, that was thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you have a whole
Anything's
clan of these
possible,
things,
right?
Yeah, yeah. You have a whole clan of these things, but it never dawned on me they might have bones of these things. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of us. Go ahead.
Yes, because we're going to get there. Oh, and Rick, did you want to add something to this?
Well, when David went to slay Goliath, it says he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in their shepherd. So you just named 4 of Goliath's brothers that they killed later. David says, I might as well kill them all right now. Let's get it over with. Why put this thing off? You know, so that was in 1 Samuel 17, verse 40.
I had never heard that before.
Yeah, me neither.
But then again, I was not familiar with this verse either in 2 Samuel. So, anyway, and this thing with 6 fingers, and it's called polydactyly, and six toes on each.
What is a name for it?
Yes, there is, and actually, it is somehow connected with giants. But
they need a
be
bigger
talking about that later.
foundation to hold them up. So instead of 5 toes, they need 6 toes.
Okay, so that was, I don't know that there's anything more in the Bible after the conquest and the scriptures about the conquest. I honestly can't remember, but there are later.
What do you mean conquest?
The conquest of Canaan.
Well, David's after Canaan. Conquest of Canaan.
Right. Well, I mean after this last verse. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, this is
after
past,
the conquest, after actually, maybe I want to say the captivity in Babylon.
Oh, after captivity in Babylon. Okay.
I don't think they
Gotcha.
appear again. I'm not sure what the last verse would be, but there are many,
Gotcha.
many referring to these clans.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, but there are later references in history. Herodotus tells us that around 564 BC, the Spartans found a skeleton 7 cubits long, which they assume was the body of Orestes. This would make the man taller than Goliath. Goliath was 6 cubits in a span, and depending what you use for a cubit, his height would be at least 9 foot 4 inches, or at most 10 foot 8.
Wow.
Pliny also tells us that during the reign of Claudius, Gabara, who was brought from Arabia, was 9 foot 9 inches tall. And in the time of Augustus, there were 2 men, Pusio and Secundilla, who were measured at 10 feet 3 inches tall.
Wow.
And here's a quote from Josephus, which is kind of interesting. He said, quote, "For which reason they removed their camp to Hebron, and when they had taken it, they slew all the inhabitants. There were till then left the race of giants, who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight, and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day, unlike to any credible relations of other men." But it's interesting that they're saying the bones. They're talking about bones now. Although we just read that, Herodotus was 564 years.
Yeah, Herodotus was quite,
that was
quite,
early.
yeah. Herodotus, yeah. Achilles days.
So I don't know. Dr. Heiser's view is that the giants were all wiped out.
Maybe the clans were wiped out. But again, if it's genetic things pop up every once in a while, right?
And there is such a thing as gigantism, which is a pituitary malfunction.
Yeah, that's a deformity. That's a deformity. But
and that's
not that
handicap. That's not.
There's a tribe in Africa. They say the average man was 6'10" or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're pretty tall.
Wow.
They're pretty tall.
Well, so he thinks that they were basically just wiped out in biblical times.
I would agree with that.
But what about but I want to bring it up to today and put it to everybody to see what they think. So we're going to have a video here.
So one question for you I have is, of all of the research you've done, all the articles, the written accounts, is there a giant account that you find most intriguing, that just fascinates you the most?
There's, oh my God, considering we've uncovered, in total probably 2,000, that's quite a giant question, really. There's several that have kind of intrigued me. There's certain ones in Britain that have really got me. The ones in the Stonehenge landscape are really intriguing because they're really tall. They're like between 9 and 14 feet. And there's some skulls and teeth that have been found around Wiltshire and Somerset. There's also in Glastonbury, where I lived for many years, and we run our conference there in England. There's a 9.5-foot skeleton was found 1,000 years ago in the Abbey, and it was a big deal back then. It was a big story. Everyone was talking about it. We've got all these old texts talking about it, and yet no one's interested. No one cares. It's just doesn't exist. But the list goes on. I mean, in America, I think one of the things that got us was you were finding not just individual skeletons, you were finding graves with hundreds of skeletons, and this was like a battle or a war that took place. And when we retraced the steps with Ross, we were working with here, of all the traditions of when the wars took place between different tribes and Native American cultures, they matched where the discoveries were later found and where all these burial places were found. So the more you look into the myth, the legend, the traditions, the folklore, all this kind of stuff, you've got to look at that with a really clear mind and imagine that might be true or based on truth or have elements of truth. And then if you look carefully, it fits in with what is actually discovered and what people are still saying today. I mean, for instance.
Okay, so there are a lot of people who believe that there were giants here in America, and in fact all over the world. And it's interesting to note that cultures all over the world have quote unquote legends about giants. I mean, I grew up reading
the flood.
No. I grew up reading Jack and the Beanstalk. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be alive or be he dead. I'll grind his bones to bake my bread.
Okay, did they teach y'all up there, up north? They taught y'all these type of sadistic.
It was a fairy tale.
Nursery
well,
rhymes
at
for
least
kids?
that's what we thought. So
No, I'm saying like the flood. The flood has a lot of, in a lot of cultures, they have similar stories.
Yes.
The flood is
Oh,
the
yes.
Same,
They
same thing
do.
like giants. You have the same thing. Same thing like dragons. You have that.
yes.
So, so things that we in 2023 would consider fairy tale.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They taught y'all those sadistic little
Oh, yeah.
nursery rhymes up north.
Mm-hmm.
That's
They
the
did.
only one I can think of.
Well, we were
but-
just talking about the education system right before this, how it went in the toilet. So
Fee, fi, fo, fum. That's all I remember.
Oh,
You remember the whole thing.
I did.
I remember most of
Wow.
it, yeah. The grinding the bones for the
To
soup.
bake
Yeah,
my
grinding
bread.
the bones.
Well,
Yeah, I sure don't remember that.
Well, and when we talked about the Watchers, we went through the book of the Watchers from the first Enoch. It talked about it said that these Nephilim were they ate men. That's what it said. They drank blood, they ate men, and they finally even cannibalized each other. That this was what was going on before the flood.
And so you have that. I mean, again, I take the watch with a little more grain of salt than you do, Terry. But you do have the prohibition: do not drink
Yep,
the blood.
you sure do.
With Noah coming off the ark.
And you also have all those
There's
prohibitions against mixing things. The Israelites weren't supposed to mix different kinds of threads, even in their clothing.
I think that was cultural, because that's what the Canaanites were doing.
Well, what would that be the big deal there? I think it was an object lesson,
Maybe.
because what are the giants? They're a mix. It
Yeah.
never should have happened, right? They're a hybrid. But anyway, I digress. So we do have some evidence that giants were here. This is what Buffalo Bill said. in his autobiography called
Hold
The
on,
Life of Honorable
Oops.
William F. Cody. He said, this was a legend told to him. It was taught by the Pawnee, by the way. It was taught by the wise men of this tribe that the earth was originally peopled by giants, who were fully 3 times the size of modern men. They were so swift and powerful that they could run alongside a buffalo, take the animal under one arm, and tear off a leg and eat it as they ran. So vainglorious were they because of their own size and strength that they denied the existence of a creator. Isn't that interesting that they
Yeah.
would throw that in?
Wait a minute.
Now, the first part's
Really?
obviously exaggeration. I do believe picking up a buffalo under one arm, but go ahead.
I don't know, Terry. I mean, if they're that big,
And eat it on the run.
Well, I was just thinking about Noah and the size of the ark. If him and his 4 sons built that and they're just average size, how did they do that? How did they do that?
120 years.
With a lot of help, I would say.
Okay.
So, we also have, and I'm so sad that I forgot to bring the book because I was going to read you the testimony of Sarah Winnemucca. She was a Paiute princess, and she related a story that her tribe had about getting together. Like, it had been long before her time, but they got together with other Indian. I'm dating myself, aren't I? Native American tribes.
I call them Indians. You can't call them Indians anymore?
I
The
don't
Native
think you're
Americans?
supposed to, but
Oh, okay. My fault.
the Paiutes got together with other tribes in the area. Now, they were out in Nevada, and apparently they had a giant problem, and they all got together and they went after the giants. They ended up corralling them in a place called Lovelock Cave. It's a great big cave, but the way she wrote it was just so descriptive. It's a much bigger story. I wish I had it, but they brought logs and sticks and piled it in front of the cave. The giants had gone in the cave, and they just a huge bonfire they put at the front of it, and they lit it on fire. And what she says is, we told them, we will put this fire out if you will agree not to eat us anymore.
Oh, gee.
I mean, you've got to read this thing to appreciate it. And the giants would not come out, and yeah, so that giant clan, according to her story, her tribe's story, was wiped out. We're going to watch a little video here about Lovelock Cave.
This is the archaeological report of 1929. I'm standing in the exact spot mentioned in the report. In the north central part of the cave, 4 feet deep, was a striking body of a man. His body was mummified and his hair was distinctly red. There was a grass rope about his neck with a knot under the left ear. The rope was about 8 feet long. The feet were bound together from the ankle to above the knees with rope. The mummification was complete except for part of the abdomen. The other mummies all had red hair. I think there were 4 or 5 more. Those that appeared to be women were small. This was not due to the shrinking of the bodies in mummification, because the man was a giant. This is the 1929 archaeological report from University of California, Berkeley.
Okay, so what happened at Lovelock Cave was that there was this legend, but eventually people went in there. They actually went after the bat guano, because apparently there are a lot of bats in this cave. Bat guano makes great fertilizer.
This is bat done. Is that what you're saying?
Yep, that's what it is.
All right.
So these miners went in there to haul out the guano and sell it, and what they found was lots and lots of skeletons.
That's not the same. That's not Sarah
No.
when
Yeah, Yes.
That's the same cave?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Same cave. And so what this guy, I included him because basically, in that he has an actual report that say that there was at least one giant skeleton found in that cave, and that's important because the official narrative says that there were never any giants here, and there were no skeletons found ever. And that's the official. Right? Because have you ever heard of that there were giants anywhere, let alone America, right?
No.
No, not at all.
Okay. So we don't have any skeletons. That's the really strange part. They were supposedly found all over. Like that other video, the first video we showed, there was that map, and there was a marker on each. If you noticed, there was a marker on everywhere that they had supposedly found giant bones. The only thing we have, and the only reason that way they could make that map was they used old newspaper reports and town histories. So right now we're going to look at some of these. Oops, my phone just. Hold on a second. We're going to take a look at. There are literally over 1,000 newspaper reports dating from like 1850 to 1930. Hold on a second.
Yeah,
We're wrestling with this microphone. I was probably fiddling with it. Okay. So, sorry about that, guys. There are literally in microfiches, because they've all been saved now. So they found over 1,000. I don't remember, but I know it's over 1,000 reports of giant bones. And this would have happened. They would have discovered these things like when the Americas was being settled. Somebody's digging a well, or a farmer's leveling his property there, because these things seem to be buried often around the mounds, and there are lots and lots. I had no idea how many quote-unquote Indian mounds there are in the Midwest. Cahokia is one of the biggest ones, but there are thousands of them. And so, or a flood would maybe wash away part of a riverbank, and they'd find a skeleton. And so it would just be Farmer Joe, or it would just be somebody working on their property. And so the newspapers would write articles about these, and with names, I want to point out, with locations. And we're going to take a look at some of these right now.
Are you going to comment on them? Or?
I can't, because I can't see them. They're too far away.
So you want me to read Maryland, prehistoric giants with bones densities comparable to that of horses? Then you have Indiana, 2 prehistoric giants on Earth, discovered burial grounds. Excuse me. You have Maryland, prehistoric giants discovered by a farmer while digging ditch. This is microfiche, right? Like microfiche.
I guess, yeah. I think that's what how they had to research it. Yeah.
I don't think the generation even knows what that is. I just did a lot of research,
right? And
I was in college with this stuff. They had no internet. That's how you had to do the research, right?
Yeah.
Vermont prehistoric giants, 8 feet tall, discovered by road workers. Vermont, 1870. That was 1870. Ohio, ancient giant, immense size and height, discovered. That was 1876. North Texas, giant skeletons discovered in bank of Pecan Creek, 1891. Northern Mexico in 1925, several prehistoric giants so tall, all discovered in the cave. Mexico, prehistoric giants on Earth and sent to Mexico City for examination in 1930. Prehistoric giant, approximately 11 feet tall, discovered with the burial. That's West Virginia in... Wait a minute. That was West Virginia in what year? West Virginia in Northern Mexico. 1925. Mexico, 1930. West Virginia, that was 1856. Pennsylvania, 18 giants about 9 feet tall. That's 1921. Pennsylvania, microfiche. I mean, it's all over.
Exactly.
Kentucky in 1894, ancient giants 8 feet tall. Michigan in 1874. I can't read that. That's pretty small.
So there are
giants.
Hundreds. I mean, there are over 1,000 of these things.
Wow.
Indiana,
all over.
1892, 25 prehistoric giants. Is that enough, Terry?
Yes,
I'm gonna
that's
keep
enough.
going. Yeah.
And they are also sometimes
I mean,
buried.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
Microfiche. Now, either everybody's lying in West Virginia and Kentucky and Michigan and northern Texas and Mexico. And they didn't have the internet where they could all get together and lie together. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? These are local newspapers all over the country.
Naming names.
What do you mean naming
You
names?
know, it's like, oh, Farmer Joe.
Towns.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, and it was his field.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if you're a local paper and this wasn't happening in Farmer Joe's field, everybody's gonna know you're a liar, right?
Someone says all hidden in Smithsonian now.
Yeah.
And why? Again, look from the biblical standpoint. Why would you want to hide this? Because people are going to start asking the questions: what? How did they get here?
Yeah.
Where did they come from? What's the history? And there's only one book that I know of that can give the answer. Genesis 6.
And most people talked about that. I mean, a lot of people talked about that at the time. They assumed that these were
The Nephilim from
Yeah.
Genesis 6.
Uh-huh.
Well, we
Exactly.
can't have that.
no.
If I'm the evil one, and we can't have that.
Are we making a believer out of you, Pastor James?
What do you mean, believer?
Because didn't you say that you thought they were all killed in the
They all did.
in ancient times? And
Yeah, it is. Those bones are. We don't know how old those bones are. How old are they? We don't
What?
know. Remember, a lot of things became fossilized, but when you had the Noah's flood, a lot of things died real quick with the pressure in the water and what and became fossilized. To me that doesn't mean that
well,
they
when
survived
you
the flood.
when you couple it with
I'm sorry, not survived.
when you couple it with all the the Indian tribes who had legends of
who
dealing
said
with
they had
these.
'em?
Yes. I guess I forgot to add that. Well,
No, you
obviously
did. No,
Sarah
you're talking about Sarah
Winnemucca
did,
but it wasn't
but-
just her tribe. It was
No. Obviously, they lasted because David killed 5 of them. We know that. That's around 1000 BC.
right.
I'm saying.
You don't think they're that old?
What do you mean that old?
I mean, you think they're from ancient times.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But isn't it interesting
David
that
killed Goliath. I know that.
none of us have ever heard any of this?
No.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is my first time to hear all of this. I
It
knew
was
about
my-
Goliath and his brothers.
I didn't know any of it either.
Yeah. And it's been there in the microfiche.
Exactly. And so this next little slideshow is just going to show some of like the giant-sized tools and weapons. That's an axe head, I do believe.
So in Ohio, a giant 7 foot tall encased in a copper covering discovered in prehistoric burial mound. Well, they're saying prehistoric. I don't know what that means. That was in Ohio. Ancient America prehistoric giant stone axe head weapon 2. Well, this is actually in some museum or something, right?
Yeah, it looks like it. Mm-hmm.
What is that?
I can't tell from here.
Gigantic.
Oh, it's an axe head, I think, because you got the place to tie it on to the
Makes sense.
to the pole or.
Makes sense.
Yeah, okay, so
Stone axe head. Okay. You can't really tell how big that is at that point.
No, you can't. No, you're right. You can't.
Well, you can tell how big that is.
And how heavy.
What is that?
That's an axe head.
Another axe head?
Yeah. But
Well, it describes the beam that Goliath wielded. That was amazing.
right, even the pole that held
shaft,
it was
yes.
was super heavy.
Yes,
I think.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was 120. I don't know. In Tennessee.
So, do giants still exist today? Okay, first of all, yeah, I think we made the point that none of us had ever heard this before, including myself, which is very, very strange. And even if these were all, they couldn't all be hoaxes. It's not possible, right?
Yeah.
There were
There's too
there were
many of
giant
them.
skeletons here. I think that's pretty much indisputable. Even though we don't have a single one, why don't we have a single one? I think one of our listeners said
They're all in the Smithsonian.
they're on the or because so many of these little articles will say, that they shipped the skeletons to the Smithsonian, or the university came and picked them up, or somebody official came and got them and took them away. Like it's time and time and time again.
Terry,
it
here's
says
what
that.
Mildred said. Afghanistan caves in 2003, around 2 platoons killed.
We're gonna.
We've got
finish up
a
with
video
that.
on that, Mildred. Also, here's what Kim says. There are 6-fingered cave drawings all over the West and around the world. The legend of why natives greeted each other with their flat palm out for view was to prove they were 5-fingered. I've heard that before, Kim.
Did you know it was
I've heard that
connected with
before.
giants, though?
No.
Yeah, because there is something.
No, not her. Not the thing that
how,
you sent me.
the-
The how was but I didn't realize that was connected to 6 fingers. No, not
Yeah,
until
I had never heard that either
the
until-
podcast I heard recently.
Until
I know the
this.
how. Well, everybody knows the how.
Right, exactly. So that's interesting. Yeah. So anyway, they've all disappeared, and the Smithsonian says there never were any, even though they appear in a couple of old reports.
Well, that settles it. If our government,
Our
says so.
government never lies to us.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I guess we're gonna get dinged for that too on YouTube. But anyway.
Yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say, but that brings us up to present day, and so we are gonna finish up with a report from, I think it was 2002 or 2003, of a giant that our military encountered in Kandahar province of Afghanistan.
Here we go.
You were in Afghanistan in 2002, and you were called into a very remote section of Afghanistan because a patrol had basically gone missing.
Exactly.
Okay, and there's
Exactly.
no
Well,
villages
just
around
nothing
for miles.
Right.
So it's very remote.
Yeah, very remote. So we flew in. To about 4 kilometers. We're hiking through the same area where they were supposed to make one of their checkpoints, one of their rally points. And before we left, there was all kinds of what happened with an ambush, but that was even odd because at the point of ambush, you would call for maybe close air support, something, okay? There was no calls made, just off the grid. So we're coming down a mountainside, and it was a nice path, goat path. As we bent around this corner, you could see this opening of the cave. There's a cave as we're coming around. And then I see there's a lot of rocks, which is another oddity, and then bone matter. When I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see something I knew was a piece of our communications equipment. So instantly we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, could be anything. And there was enough room in front of this cave, but it had a sheer drop-off. But there was enough room that we actually got into a decent dispersal in case of ambush.
You see something coming out of the cave, and it's moving with a speed and agility that catches you off guard.
Everybody. And he comes out. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet. This is a monster. Red beard, then his hair was longish. past the shoulder, a scarlet red, and Dan runs at him and starts shooting, which broke all of us into the reality. Because it was
So
surreal.
now your training is kicking.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
muscle memory, complete muscle memory. While Dan is moving at him, another bro of mine's laying down fire, and I start firing. He skewers Dan. He's now got him on this pike. It went through him. He's still got him, and he's coming after more. We all just clicked in. I don't know what it was, but I remember we're all like, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. Our weapons components were in force. We had 308s, and we had Barrett 50s. This is sounding longer than it took. We're talking 30 seconds. And he's taking multiple hits, and is still moving. Dan was dead. Okay? And why is a good man, probably one of the best men I know, now dead. Before I'd left, they were already starting what they call a 9-line, which is a medevac request. They're sending out a medevac request, then all of a sudden it's not a medevac request. All of a sudden we had a helicopter show up because, like I told you, it was a large precipice and a sheer drop. So the helicopter just came up from the drop. They had dropped netting, which is like cargo netting. It's like squares. We were told we had to bundle him up. And we get another bigger helicopter, but it's almost like a Jolly Green Giant used to look back in the day that could get, through this area. Because the mountains, you gotta remember, Chinooks could only go in certain places because they had enough lift. Mm-hmm. And so we got him on there. The thing was too big. We couldn't move it. It smelled worse than a skunk. A corpse that's been around for a while.
Really foul.
Oh, it was like a combination because of the, how do you put that, the persistence of a skunk smell. But once the helicopter came in, dropped its little hook, and off he goes. The communication was sent out that we had a very large possible human creature. Of course we're upset. That's a given, okay? We lost a very good guy. But add to that, you're discussing something that even in our after action report, they're saying rewrite it. And we had to rewrite it the way they wanted it.
How many fingers?
Six toes.
And 6 toes.
And the nails were weird because if you see somebody that ever has, I don't know what it's called, but it's
Like a fungus on
the nails, how they get pointy and they're like gnarly. That's what they look like.
I'm going to show you.
Okay.
I think that video could have done without the music and all the sound effects for sure. Okay. Oh my gosh. There is a second video. I don't think we have time to show it, but it's a second soldier recounting the story that apparently this story was circulating in Afghanistan among the soldiers, and he was posted in 2005. And he heard the story, and he said that they also train them. Normally, when you shoot somebody, you shoot for body mass in their chest. Mm-hmm. But he said they were trained. They did some training to shoot high.
Shoot toward the head and then shoot higher. And he was like, "Why? Why?"
Yeah,
because they were training to shoot giants. And is the thinking.
Is what he said.
Now, what is this on 2 minutes? We can go over a little bit if you want.
Yeah, I didn't know if you. I mean, we can. I mean, we have time. I just didn't know if you wanted to do any discussion.
Yeah, we can do some discussion. Let's play the second one. That's fine.
And we're doing those operations, and as we're getting into firefights, we're getting into different scrimmages, you want to put it that way, we would come back to the base, and we started hearing this rumor about a unit that killed this, what they started calling this really tall person. At first I didn't think anything of it, and then come to find out that the person that they killed actually was 3 times the size of a man, had extra digits on their hand and digits on their feet, and had red hair, and a special unit had come in and wanted this target. Well, we'd heard that they had killed this thing inside a cave or the mouth of a cave. And it was common knowledge among the military to hear this.
And when you say common knowledge, what do you mean? I mean, how does that work?
Years later, to come to find out, when I had returned from Afghanistan and had met other military members that had not been there in the operations with me, if you would bring up the Giant of Kandahar, they knew about it. When you first hear it, you're thinking like, this has got to be a joke. This has got to be a hoax. But then after things go down a certain way and you keep hearing it, you start to realize it's not a joke. They kept telling us to keep our weapons high, which means normally it's two to the chest, one to the head, but they kept telling us to put it towards a man's head and put it higher. So we would question, why do they want us to shoot higher than a man's head?
That's bizarre.
It is.
There you go.
Okay. So, what do y'all think?
Here, while you're thinking, Mildred says this, look up Steve Quayle.
Yeah,
You're familiar with that?
I'm familiar with his name, yes.
Yeah, is it villagers sacrifice to these things?
Yeah, that's one of the things I heard too in my research, that they would even like mark certain goats with like dye.
Mm.
Why?
Because those are the ones that the giants can take.
And the giants knew that, and they took it with them?
Apparently, that was the
that's
idea.
the deal they struck with the giants.
Leave us alone. We'll give you a goat here and there. Afghanistan's a funny place, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you would expect, if you had clans, and if this was something that was on the earth, you would expect some evidence of it, right? Some
Right.
here and there, and I've seen stuff. I remember when YouTube started or something, the whole internet started. That was one of the big things they were putting up on the internet. These giant bones, giant bone discoveries.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to warn everybody. If you go online and you start looking into this, and especially if you go to pictures, there was an internet website that did a contest. It was a Photoshop contest to find out who could make the best fake giant skeleton picture.
Wow.
Wouldn't it, the enemy is so clever. Just and so there are tons and tons of hoaxes.
I remember that. And I looked it up, and it did say something about a hoax or whatever in Photoshop.
Yes. So these supposed photos. And they look, actually, I've seen a few of them, and they look very real. I mean, they did a good job. I don't know who got the grand prize, but so yeah. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I am sure that there were giant skeletons all over America at this point.
Well, the Bible says there were giants. Goliath. Everyone knows the story of David and Goliath, right? So.
Yeah, and I think it's been more recent than people would. And this the Giant of Kandahar story, I'm not sure what to make of that, but I guess I wouldn't rule it out. Afghanistan's got a lot of mountains, desolate mountains and caves and.
Yeah, and if the soldier is recounting the story, then why would he make it up?
It was more than one. There was two stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually there was a third one I couldn't find again. It was the guy claimed to be the pilot who flew. He must have been flying it from. I think he was flying from the base elsewhere, the airplane pilot who flew it too. So there were actually a total of 3 that interviews. But
So is this like what's that site? 51.
Area 51.
Area 51. So we don't get to see pictures of all these people, and they measure them out and dissect them, and this is what we found. So.
Yeah, I don't know, but it sure is. And there's a lot of, just be careful if you go start looking into this. And there's so much. Oh my gosh. For me to narrow it down, it was very hard. It was quite a project.
Good job. Well done. That is a lot of stuff.
But the microfiche, again, what they did was they took the local stories and put them on microfiche. And the fact that you have so much of it from so many different areas. If you understand what microfiche is, what they take all of the local newspapers and they put it on digital photo. Basically take pictures of it and catalog it. That's how we used to do research before Google was around.
Yeah.
Google was invented.
Yes. Oh man, it was cumbersome.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and the mere fact that you have that all over, boy, that's pretty hard to dispute.
Right, but the bigger story maybe is because we know there were giants, obviously.
The Bible says so.
Yeah, but the bigger story is hiding it. I think.
Yeah.
Did you know that Stonehenge, actually the original name of Stonehenge was Giant's Dance? There are a lot of places in Great Britain who had names that giant this, giant that. Yeah.
No. Well, if Rick and I are right and this Psalm 83 is happening, a lot of answers are going to be, a lot of questions are going to be answered real soon. All right, so trust the Bible. Again, all this moves back to trust in the Bible. If we read Genesis 6 as I think it reads, that the giants and the Nephilims, if that's true, if the story of Goliath is true, if the stories written in Samuel and 2nd Chronicles are true, that they had the tribe of these things, if the story of Joshua is true, they came back, they were afraid because of the land of giants, right? If it's true, then you would expect some bones to verify it. And here's what we have. Bones verifying that there were there were giants on the earth. So.
Oh, one last thing. It's interesting. Then they passed a law, and it was in the 90s. A law was passed in the United States that any bones that any institution had that were quote unquote Native American, even though these wouldn't have been Native American, have to be given back to the tribes for repatriation. And of course, you know, you can't just go digging around in Indian mounds anymore. I think that's been against the law for quite some time. But how convenient, right?
Yeah.
Well,
let's not dig around in the sand pit.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Terry, for producing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Interesting. Find us as we are going to start moving towards Spotify. We do have a Spotify account. Look us up. We're going to start moving that. And we have some sponsors in which we're going to start spreading this ministry around. Why? Because people say don't speak about politics and religion. And that's the two things we want to talk about the most. Till next time, thank you. God bless. And
Good night, everyone.
The Bible is true. Good night.
Yes, good night.
Good night.